Hello and welcome to this Beyond Shakespeare exploring session of Witty and Witless by John Heywood. This is one of Heywood's earliest plays, the earliest extant plays, that is. It's from about the 1520s, and the other one of his we have from this period is a translation of a French farce, which he's entitled John John. But this play, Witty and Witless, there is in fact already a full cast audio adaptation up on the Beyond Shakespeare Podcast site, available wherever quality podcasts are to be found, in many places. And so tonight we have, for this text, which, well, you're going to see, this text is a doozy, and we've got a very competent team of readers who we're fortunate to have. In the role of John, we have...
Hi, I'm Greg, and I'm currently located in Berkshire.
And in the role of James, we have...
Hi, I'm Eric, and I'm starting to think this should have been alphabetical, but, it's all with J's, so I don't know if that works.
You are correct, Eric. There are many J's. And by many, I mean 3. And in the role of Jerome, we have...
Three is a crowd. I'm Alexandra, and apologies for the weird faces a little earlier. I was moving my lamp and nearly destroyed the place.
And I'm very glad that you did not destroy your place, or indeed any place. We wish for all our places to be intact and happy and preferably full of cats. And I am your guest host, Liza Graham, because no one could stop me. And without further ado, we shall hop into the top of this text, Witty and Witless. We are given no indication of setting. We just discover two people, John and James, having a bit of a talk. Take it away, John.
A marvellous matter, merciful lord, if reason with this conclusion accord. Better to be a fool than a wise man.
Better or worse, I say as I began, better is for man the man be witless than witty.
Ye show some witty wittiness.
Experience shall witness my tale true, and for temporal wealth let us first view. And that experience may show the truer, except we reason to be our viewer. In which reason by experience we know, the folk most witty to whom there doth grow. By friends dead, therefore, before, nor left them behind, nor by living friends no living assigned, except they will starve, their finding they must find, by much pain of body or more pain of mind. And as for the witless, as who saith the sot, the natural fool called, or the idiot, from all kinds of labour that doth pain constrain, as far as sufficiency needeth obtain, in surety of living the sot doth remain.
In surety of living, but not without pain, for admit all sots in case, as be many, that live without labour, yet where is any, but for that one pleasure he hath more pain, than the witty worker in all doth sustain. What wretch so feareth pain, having any wit, like the witless wretch? None, if ye mark it. Who cometh by the sot, who cometh he by, that vexeth him not some way usually? Some beat him, some bob him, some droll him, some job him, some tug him by the hairs, some lug him by the ears, some spit at him, some spurn him, some toss him, some turn him, some snap him, some snatch him, some cramp him, some crutch him, some cuff him, some clout him, some lash him, some lout him, some whisk him, some whip him, with sharp nails some nip him. Not even Master Soma, the king's grace is full, but tasteth some time some nips of new school. And beside this kind of fretting and fuming, another kind of tormenting consuming, the witty to the witless oft invent another invention of your full intent. The fool, by flattery to torment is brought, so far overjoyed in his brain so wide wrought, that by joy of a jewel scant words of might, the sot oftest sleepeth no wink in a whole night. And for example, with a Walsingham ring, this distemperance to the sot you may bring, and make him joy therein, as it were a thing of price to pay the ransom of a king. Enjoying whereof, if any man got way, to get it from him as every child may, then man and child seeth the sot in such case, that naught but painful sorrow taketh any place. By these small proofs, as small wit may guess, that wide were the witty to wish them witless.
The effect of this your matter, as ye speak it, standeth much in 2 points, as I take it, of which twain the one is that the sot hath, by jolling and jobbing and other such like scath, extreme pain with extremity of ire. The other is that, after fretting furious fire, that the fool with each fruitless trifling toy is so distempered with distemperate joy, that as much pain bringeth his pleasant passion, as doth the pinching of his most painful fashion. These 2 points considered, the sot, as ye say, hath some pain sometime, but most times I say nay.
Then from no pain to some pain the witless are brought.
Yea, but witty and witless wittily brought by some pain to such pain that witty feel most. Then witty and witless, each part his part boast. Take of witty the degrees and number all, and of that number I think the number small, but that each one of them is of need assigned to labor sore in body or else in mind, and few to all that fortune so doth favor, but in body and mind so both they do labor. And of both these labors the most painfulest is the labor of mind, I have heard jest. And lest both pains or most of twain be too tough for you to match with, and the pain least pain enough, to the first most pain of the witless noddy, join we the witty's least pain, pain of body, who seeth what pain labor bodily bringeth, shall easily see thereby how the body ringeth. Husbandmen's ploughing or earing and sowing and hedging and ditching and with reaping and mowing, in carting, such lifting, such burdens bearing, that pain of the body bringeth these to staring. And much of this done in time of such heat, that in cold cave covered the carcass must sweat. Some other use crafts in which work is so small, that in summer pleasantly they live all, who in winter, when husbandmen warm with work, in that they may not stir, for cold they are even stark. Some in winter freeze, some in summer fry, and the witless doth neither, for commonly other with worshipful or honorable, he temperately standeth in house at the table. And of all his labors reckon the whole rabble, bigger burden beareth he than his babble. So that from all these pains, or the like received, the witless hath warrant to be acquitted. And sure the sot's pleasure in this last acquittal countervailed his pain in your first recital. For unto the sot's nipping and beating join the witty laborers' nips and fretting. And whether ye count by year, month, or week, ye shall find these of the witty to seek. As far as of the witless, and of both sorts, this is the difference that to me imports. Sots are coiled of other, the witty coileth himself. What choice thus alleged?
Small? Wholesome elf. Somewhat he toucheth me now in very deed. Howbeit to this am I not yet full agreed. The witty who beat themselves by business may oft in beating favour themselves, I guess. But such opportunity by wit is oft espied, that labour by wit is oft qualified. In taking time or place as best may stand, most easily to dispatch things coming in hand. Wit have provision or way for relief, to provide some remedy against mischief. Witty take business as witty will make it, and as witty beat witless, witless must take it.
Take ye how ye list, ye can make it no less, but witty have such pain as my words witness. For though wit for some for time sometime may pain prevent, yet in most times therefore said pain is present, which pain in the witty wittily weighed may match pain of the witless by ye first laid. And to the second point, for distemperate joys by having or hoping of fancies of toys, in witless or witty both take eyes one, for though the things that the witty have or hope on are in some kind of account things much greater than things of the sort's joyings, yet no whit better than nor less pain bringeth that passion, but indifferent to both, except witty have the worst torment. Think you a right good witty, having clearly £1,000 suddenly given him yearly, who before that hour might dispend no penny, nor till that hour have ever looked for any, might not joy as much that sudden receiving as joyeth the sought receipt of his Walsingham ring, and thereby be kept from quiet sleep a week, as well as the ring maketh the sought sleep to seek. And in a sudden losing that gift again, might not the witty be pressed with pain, as deep as the witless his ring stolen or lost? And though this ensample of chance said when at most, yet sometime it happeth, and daily we see, that folk far from witless passion be, by joyful hope of things till them like to hap, or having of things pleasant the late light in the lap, as much to their unrest for distemperancy as ye showed, the witless restless formerly, and oft time for cause considered and weighed, as light as your Walsingham ring afore laid. Wit in witty hath such perfection, to bring disposition full in objection. And the difference of disposition is such that some wits hope too little, some wits hope too much. By which overmuch I say, and say must ye, that witty and witless one in this case must be. And thus in both cases reasoning cause showeth, cause to conclude that to the witty groweth as much pain as to the witless, whereby as good be witless as witty, say I.
Damn it, I gotta remember to unmute myself when I ring the bell.
Well, I'd forgotten to unmute myself to speak, so we did quite well between us.
Clearly we're both witless, and so we know what side those two are on. So
my head hurts.
We've had a taste of what kind of text Heywood wrote for this play. What do you guys make of it?
I want to go home.
Sorry about the fireworks. There are fireworks.
Yes.
But yes, I'm just clarifying that's I did that. Oops, that's me. Sorry. So I really want to go back and read all those arguments properly. I feel like one of the things that this definitely offers as a piece is a great opportunity for humor on several levels. So one is obviously the intellectual level of what those arguments actually are and what their flaws are and what their kind of uses and interesting parts are, and the mental back and forth that is definitely happening. I'm just not able to pick up on all of it. But also for, I think, a modern audience as well as for an audience of the time, presumably part of the humor would come from other than what is being said, the how it's being said, and that side, the physical side of things and so on.
Yeah, we're given very little in the way of physical circumstances. It reads as though maybe one of the speakers is a clerk, a scholar, and maybe one is a farmer. But then when they talk about the witless, first of all, content warning for ableist slurs, but when they talk about the people they deem witless, they talk about Will Summers, who was a professional fool, a fool to Henry VIII. they talk about husbandmen, which were farmers, plowmen, and how hard they have to work. And they also talk about a natural fool, which would be perhaps what we might call a person with an intellectual disability. In some cases, natural was certainly one of the ways in which, in period, people like that were referred to.
There's also the word idiot is also used, and it's in the context of what I guess the same context that you'd have the phrase village idiot in. So the person who, as you said, the person with what we would now call mental disabilities, who is there to be laughed at for them by the community.
Yeah, and not just laughed at. Like, this is a quite alarming catalog of what people in passing do to vulnerable people. It's a very rapid fire passage of verse where they say, yeah, people just walk by and for no reason just torture him. Some beat him, some bob him, some tug him by the hairs, some lug him by the ears. And they're saying that even Will Summer, Henry VIII's fool, was not exempt from this treatment by courtiers, or possibly even by Henry, they don't say. Will Summers will come up again and again throughout this play. The other reference that a modern audience might not get, which was sort of an in-joke at the time, is to a Walsingham ring. There was an abbey at Walsingham with a shrine to Our Lady, which was a frequent point of pilgrimage for people in England. And the abbey made quite a tidy profit by selling souvenirs, including rings, which were very affordable, and people would get these rings as souvenirs of their pilgrimage. But the rings were not valuable. So a Walsingham ring is something that appears valuable and isn't. Poundland.
On the subject of that list of physical mistreatments of fools, professional or otherwise, that was one place that kind of, I think, gave me an indication of, right, this is clearly a description of physical actions. I wonder, would it only be a description, or is that, and I guess in modern staging you can do what you like. What they did at the time, we have no way of knowing. But yes, whether there's an enactment of there's this and there's that. Oh, I'm actually having fun. There's also some of this and some of that, and this is great. I'm going to say more because it feels like a really, really long list of very similar things otherwise.
It does, and yeah, I mean, if we were putting this on a stage, it might be fun to have this argument take a physical as well as a verbal form, and it's a place where the meter of the verse changes and the pattern of the verse changes, so it would be nice to mark that change in some way physically. So at the beginning of this section, we had a proposal that it was better to be witless than to be witty. Because even though even though witless people have to endure all this abuse, they and trickery, apparently, that apparently witty people suffer from being witty, which we will hear more about as we go on. John and James will continue this until their friend Jerome just comes up and interrupts them. But that is coming in the future. So, what does John think now of James's conclusion?
Yeah, it hurts. I enjoyed doing that speech. I must admit, the one where it was like just, yeah. I had to make it physical in the end because it was about the only way I could cope with the rhyme.
And my own. Halfway through, it just went, yes, perfection. No, that rhymes with affection. Oh, wait, no, that doesn't. Yeah.
Going back to the Fools thing, I remember, and I do not know which, because I've been doing this for too long, as I think we all have. There was a discussion a while back on one of these events where we talked about the natural fool versus the I forgot what the other phrase is.
Artificial fool?
The artificial fool. And when that line came up, normally I'd go, what? It was nice to actually understand that line. It's been something more than because I know I must have I'd probably heard it before and gone, what the heck is that going on about? But, yeah. I felt like that play starts mid-conversation. It doesn't feel like you've arrived. It feels like you've almost happened upon a conversation in the theatre rather than starting of a conversation, if that makes sense.
Apologies about the fireworks. I actually felt as though you arrive at the end of a conversation, like what could be the end of a conversation, right? So we're agreed. It's better to this than that. Absolutely, we are. And then we spend an hour talking about it still.
Yeah, you would expect for there to be a prologue, for maybe Jerome, in fact, to speak a prologue, or for a fool, or a vice sort of figure to come out and say, here's what the play is about. Is it better to be witty or witless? So that's, it does feel like it starts kind of abruptly. And we'll see if it ends the same way. But for now, let's read on. John, if you would, in your own time.
Second, I'm finding myself again.
Oh, okay, Eric, if you have the place, if you want to give Greg from, and thus in both cases.
And thus in both cases reasoning cause showeth, cause to conclude that to the witty groweth as much pain as to the witless, whereby as good be witless as witty, say I.
That conclusion is concluded wisely. Your prime proposition did put precisely. Better to be witless than witty, and now as good to be witless as witty, say you. But that wit which puts case in degree comparative, concludeth case in degree positive, shall not in that case claim degree superlative.
Unmute. You pass in this taunt your prerogative, but that wit which boasteth the full of his winning, as though he knew the end of the thing at beginning, that wit shall know witless impediment to be taken witty with wits excellent. I conclude here not for the end, but for the midst, which if ye will hear to end as reason bids, ye shall perceive and also condescend to grant me thanks then. In that I intend your fall by fierce handling to be the more fair, to set ye down featly, stare after stare, and so after a figure of induction to bring your part soft and fair to destruction. For where ye grant fully for aught your words make, as that as much pain witty as witless do take, so from this midst to the end I shall prove that most pain of twain to the witness doth move. Witless doth move, for as I load equally pains of body to witty and witless, likewise will I overload the witty with pain of mind, in matter as plain as can be assigned. Which pain of mind, in meat measure to weigh, is more painful than pain of body, I say.
You say so and said so, but not so said not I. I'm going to do that again. You say so and said so, but so said not I. Nor say it not yet, but that saith deny. Until saying prove your saying more plainly, I will essay to say the contrary. I think pains of body counted in each kind may compare with all kinds of pains of mind.
If ye assuredly think as ye say now, I think ye think as few men think but you. How about that being but an incident to principal purpose presently meant, yet that exception took you wittily, for had ye granted that, as ye shall shortly, then forthwith should our principal process have concluded in the part that I profess, for a mean whereunto as measure may meet unmeasurable things, as who say, joining like proportion, as may be meant the mean laborer to the mean student. And ye shall anon find the student's pain more painful than the laborer's labor plain.
The student's pain is oft pleasantly mixed in feeling what fruit by his study is fixed.
The laborer's labor quitteth that at a whip, in feeling the fruit his workmanship. As much delight carters oft have in carts neat trimmed as do students in books with gold neat lumined, and as much envy who may drive his cart best as among students who may seem learned highest, whereby inward delight to toil forth each part seemeth me indifferent to art or to cart. Other things may rhyme with that. And further, mean labor in most common wise is most part handsome and wholesome exercise that purgeth humors to man's life and quickness, which study breedeth to man's death or sickness. Also, most kinds of labor and most commonly strain most gross outwards parts of the body, where study, sparing shoulders, fingers, and toes, to the head and heart directly study goes. Perverse is your judgment if ye judge not plain, that less is the peril and less is the pain, the knocking of knuckles which fingers doth strain, than digging in the heart or the drying of the brain.
For common means kinds in both parts now laid, I see not but reason saith as ye have said.
The labor of body and mind thus compare in what degrees ye can to devise to declare between both being not knit in such degree, but that one from the other may separate be, and that both labors enjoining ye erect as like in degree as wit may conject, and both once search shall warrantize. In labor of mind the worst pain doth arise.
Methinketh I could make it otherwise appear, such save I lack time to debate matter here. For time of reasoning would be long therein, and time of reasoning must be short herein, which weighed with that this standeth but incidentally to our present purpose principally. I grant to agree, as ye have defined, of labour of body and labour of mind, that labour or pain of mind is the greater, and this now granted, what be the better?
So much the better, and you so much the worse, that ye may now put your tongue in your purse, and for any word in defence your tongue shall tell. After these my next words, give ear and mark well. This labour of mind, which we now agree above labour of body, we must decree to join solely to the witty, for possibly cannot the witless take part of that pain.
Why?
How can he have pain by imagination that lacketh all kinds of consideration? And in all sense is he so insufficient that not can he think in aught that may be meant by any mean to devise any self-thing, nor devise in thing past, present, or coming. Nor more hath he in mind either pain or care than other cock my horse or kill my mare. This cause with witless pain or of mind dispenses, but the witty, having all vital senses, hath thereby an inward clock, which mark who will, may oft times go false, but it never standeth still. The plummets of that clock come never to ground. Imagination is watched and goeth so round. To which consideration giveth so ear, that in the witty mind the restless rest is there. Small wit may guess, no one wit can deem how many or how much are their pains extreme, nor how many contrary kinds in some one breast. If ye perceive this tale, see it witnessed. These three things of the which first is that the witless of labor or pain of mind have release. The second is that the witty have endure all pains of mind, and that with doth that procure. Thirdly, I glanced at pain of mind, alluding that to be most pain, as in for concluding, perceive ye thus?
Yea, grant it true too.
Then ye must grant witty to have most pain.
So I do.
If witty have most pain of twain, ye must say, better to be witless than witty.
Nay.
I say yes.
I say nay, and so will inveigh that I will hold you to wag another way. As I grant witty of twain most pain endure, so will I prove witty to have most pleasure, which pleasure shall both drown the wittiest pain in the pleasure in which the witless remain.
Round two. So we've go Alex.
I know why Jerome doesn't speak for most of this play. He's the one beatboxing.
Ah.
Go with it, bro. Love it.
I truly wish we could make this a practical experiment over Zoom. When will technology catch up with our desires for beatboxing?
But this is so definitely a rap battle. It's it's amazing how much comes out of that just by pushing on the rhythm and or leaning on the rhythm.
It's true. The rhyme, the rhythm and rhyme gives you a lot of things. Now, does anyone notice a difference in voice between the two characters?
No.
Well, basically,
Go ahead. You go ahead.
ladies first.
Hey, we're moving past the gender binary.
True, very true.
The thing that I found interesting was I don't know if it's necessarily that that's sort of defining of the character, but it's certainly the situation at the time. There's a shift of, I wouldn't call it power, but something like that, of status maybe, when we get is it James? Is it James that you're reading, Greg? John. Two choices, I messed it up. Starts asking the questions. Starts kind of throwing shorter questions at James. One of them is James. Yeah, I don't know about. Does that feel like a shift in balance to you guys?
Yeah, I mean, when James gives John these long speeches and John gives James these one-word answers back, like why or nay, it does feel like he's forcing the other guy to do the work.
Yeah. It's like, why are you making me talk more? I mean, what more proof do you need? Yeah, I can see why they wanted to kill the player.
So we have in this section we've said that the witless have pain of body and the witty have pain of mind, and which of these two pains is the greater? And obviously the playwright has said, oh, pain of mind is greater. Yes, the kind of pain I go through writing these plays is so much greater than the physical pain of someone plowing in the rain and the cold. So we've concluded that pain of mind is greater, so maybe it's worse to be witty and it's better to be witless. And John has said, no, because I will prove that the witty has, as well as most pain, they have most pleasure. So that would make it that will make it slightly more desirable to be witty. So now we're going to talk about. We've been arguing about which has the greatest pain, and now apparently we're going to argue about which one has the greatest pleasure, and it is James's turn to speak next. James, if you would, in your own time.
This promise will hardly bring good payment, for it is a strange kind of argument to prove him in most pleasure hath most pain, or him in least pain who hath least or him in least pain who least pleasure doth sustain.
Let us reason or pleasure on both sides, and then let that side have the best that the best provides.
All pleasures on both sides? That were a thing to make us make end tomorrow morning.
Now the best part of my part cometh on. Ye make marvellous haste, ye would fain be gone.
Right now yourself could weigh in right witty sort that reasoning here now reason must be short.
It shall be short enough if ye take away all that part that for my part effect doth lay.
I will neither take away all nor take all, but for a mean between both myself straight shall allege, not pleasures all I say, but one. as overweighteth other pleasures everyone, which pleasure where it is fine doth not remain. All pleasures in all parts are pleasures but vain. Of which one pleasure the witless are sure ever, and of that pleasure witty are sure never.
What pleasure is that?
Pleasure of salvation. I think yourself will affirm affirmation that from our forefathers' sin, original baptism, original baptism sealeth us all acquittance general, and faith of infants while they infants abide, in faith of parents for the church that is supplied, whereby wit till wit take root of discerning, and between good and ill give perfect warning. Wherever innocency dispute, for thoughts, words, or deeds God doth none ill impute. Where God giveth no discerning, God taketh none account, in which case of account the sought doth amount, for no more discerneth the sought at 3 years' score, than the innocent born within years three before. This short saying, if ye mind revolve, then shall this long debate forthwith dissolve.
Sir, I grant such shall be saved as you tell, and safe Sir, I grant such shall be saved as you tell, and safe shall witty be too, if they do well.
If they do well, that if altereth much low, the effect of my sentence to witless.
How so?
That if laid for the witty purporteth a doubt, but all doubts in the witless are scraped clean out. Sans doubt the witless is sure of salvation. Whereby to conclude this communication, make witty sure of all pleasures can be laid, doubting lack of none, but this one pleasure last said, and of all pleasures witless to have none, saving he standeth in surety of this one, is not the surety of this one much better than of the rest, though the number be greater?
Yes.
Like as a goose can say nothing but hiss, so hath he now nothing to say but yes. And in affirming my saying, he saith this, in which he granteth this his part not partly amiss, but all amiss, as who saith in all places, the sum whereof in both parts standeth in three cases, of which three the argument of the first was thus: in laborious pain of body to discuss, who suffereth more, the wittier the sought, which by both the sense we knit this knot, that as much pain of body in effect hath the one, as the one as the other, concluding thus far thereupon. As good to be witless as witty, and then we'll argue labor, pain of mind in men. Wherein I driving him to grant pain of mind more than pain of labor bodily defined. In the second case, I pain of mind proving to witty and not to witless to be moving, driving him to grant further that by that pain, better without wit than with wit to remain. Now, in this third case, where ye made a brag, by the pleasures in the witty to hold me wag, and pleasures of the witless to overwhelm, I stemming in with him, stack so to the helm, that his part finally to shipwreck is brought. The surety of all pleasures in this world wrought match not the surety of pleasure eternal, and the state of sorts have none account so carnal than God imputeth any ill to them, I say, and the wittiest account augmenteth every day. And the auditor's wit, who shall take the account so clear, he forgets not one word in 1,000 year. What need more words? I think the least wit here seeth these three cases on my side so appear, that the two first cases temporally, and in this third last case spiritually, is seen fully. I may conclude finally, better to be witless than to be witty.
Sorry about that. So say I now too, by a blessed lady, I give up my part and take your part plainly. Of witty and witless I wish now rather that my child may have a fool to his father. The pith of your conclusions be also pure, that better be a fool than a wise man sure.
Ah. So the argument has taken an unexpected turn here, that rather than arguing about whether it's better to be a fool or a wise person, rather than argue about pain and pleasure, we've ended up arguing about salvation, that the witty know themselves to be sinners, and the witless are in a state of innocence, which means they'll automatically be saved. So whether they know it or not, they have that consolation. And innocent was another way at that time that people did refer to some people with intellectual disabilities. But then innocent also meant what it means now. It just depends on the context of how they were using the word. If they were saying an innocent, as a noun. But it seems that people of that nature are included in, but are not all of, the category witless. And Alexandra brought up a really good point in chat, which is, who is in the category witty?
Yeah, because in just the last argument before James, I'm going to go with James, before James sums everything up, in that last bit of argument, it seemed as though the only distinction was between whether or not people are sound of mind, and anyone who is falls under witty, and everyone who isn't falls under witless. And this was the argument to do with salvation and the innocence in that respect, in that meaning of the word. But yeah, like for the rest of it, doesn't seem as though that's what they've been referring to from the start. So what have they been referring to?
I mean, we've seen a lot of, when we've done our medieval plays, we've seen we've seen how hard it is to sustain intellectual labor, and you get overwhelmed by things like the monster of tediousness, and tempted by various drunk people who will make you drunk and take away your intellect or whatever. So we've seen a lot of emphasis on how difficult it is to attain learning and to be learned, and I'm guessing this is because of who was writing the plays. But still, it seems kind of audacious to conclude that mental labor is worse than physical labor. Any thoughts on that?
I wonder whether it's labor in the sense of toil, in the sense of the difficulties of, rather than labor in the sense of work. So I wonder whether the argument is about not just, it's hard to do, it's hard to think, man, but that and if we do interpret it in this way, that in the way that I'm about to express, then it has a lot more relevance nowadays, about the difficulty of dealing with obstacles on a mental level. And suddenly we're talking about mental health difficulties, and the things that are to do with emotional and personality and other such labels nowadays, but that at the time would have just been a question of losing your wits or things like that, losing your mind. So whether the distinction kind of refers, or not the distinction, but the labor part at least, refers to the difficulties and the struggles on a mental level, and then those things are comparable to the physical in discourse still. Even nowadays, there is a comparison made.
It's true. We talk a lot about physical health and mental health. But then there's this assumption that people who labor and who work with their hands are by necessity witless. So does witless just mean uneducated? Or, and indeed, must someone who labors manually necessarily be uneducated? Any thoughts on that?
As well as how does educated or knowledgeable relate to intelligent.
There is that. There is that. But in any case, James has now, it appears, convinced John that to be witless is in fact better and preferable to being witty. And John, Greg, if when we read on, if you can give your last speech, "So say I now too, by our blessed Lady," showing how convinced you are by James. And so the argument is over, right? Or is it? We shall see. Take it away, John.
So say I now too, by a blessed lady, I give up my part and take your part plainly. Of witty and witless I wish now rather that my child may have a fool to his father. The pith of your conclusions be also pure, that better be a fool than a wise man sure.
Enter Jerome.
Not so, although your fancy do so surmise, not better for man to be witless than wise, nor so good to be witless as witty neither. Thus is your wit deceived in other.
Why, what difference between wise and witty?
As much sometime as between wisdom and folly.
Man can in no wise be wise without wit.
No, and man may have great wit and wisdom, no wit. Wit is the word, I'll say that again. No, and man may have great wit and wisdom no whit. Wit is the worker of all perceiving, and indifferent to good or ill working, and as much wit may be in things of most ill, as in the best things wit can aspire unto. In virtue or vice, I mean, wit hath receipt of none ill, where wit upon wisdom doth wait. Wisdom governeth wit always virtue to use, and all kinds of vice always to refuse. Thus is wisdom in good part taken always, and guideth wit in all things, being things of praise. Thus, though you must, as ye need not, grant this ground, which is better witless than witty to be found, yet as much as wisdom above wit showeth, so much granteth ye him, more than of need groweth.
This is some young schoolman, a fresh commoner. Heard ye the principle that planted this jar?
I heard all.
And doth not all of my side fall?
No, if you had reasoned as I shall.
If ye, as you say, have heard all here said, and that saying have so widely weighed to weigh my part worst, here in conclusion, then are ye witless that we two talked on. But babble your will, this will I bid upon. Better be sought summer than sage Solomon.
Give ye sentence, or ye hear what I can say. Lo, how will carrieth him and his wit away.
And James has indeed exited.
Is that you, Alexandra, or is it me?
John.
Oh.
Sir.
No, it's all right. I've lost where we are then. Sorry. Sorry, what's the...
Shall we go from the exit of James?
Yeah, that's where I thought we were, but I thought I'd missed a sentence. Sorry.
Yeah. Give ye a sentence, or ye hear what I can say. Lo, how will carrieth him and his wit away.
Sir, if ye heard all in my part, how say ye? What did I grant him so far? Show I pray ye.
All that is granted well nigh.
Nay, I trow.
Ye shall when we have done. Now, not trow, but no. For entry whereunto, I pray ye answer me a question or twain or more, if need be. And first unto this answer as ye can. Whether would ye be a reasonable man or an unreasonable beast?
Buy and sell. I would be the simplest man between heaven and hell, rather than the best beast that ever was bred. Then if ye be of one of the twain must be sped, ye would be a maltman, ye a miller rather than a mill horse.
That should probably be my line.
Yeah, I'm just looking at sorry.
No, but it's missing
Where
in the
would we
script.
split it then, that speech?
Then if ye of one of the twain must be sped,
I'll go back to buy and sell and then stop at bread then. Buy and sell? I would be the simplest man between heaven and hell rather than the best beast that ever was bred.
Then if ye of one of the twain must be sped, you would be a maltman, a miller, rather than a mill horse.
Be my well-willer.
Yea.
I speak no more of this then. What man fie? I would not be a beast for all this world I, were it for naught else but for this life present.
The time of this life indeed I mean and meant. But tell me why, by your faith, even plainly, you will not change estate with the mill horse.
Why, there be wise, and wherefores I think 1,000 in count of 2 kinds of things coming in hand, sensible pleasure and sensible pain. And first for pain sustained in these twain, begin with the mill horse whom you put for proof, or any like beast sustaining the like grief, and I would take the pain the poor beasts take. I would each day be twigged and tied to a stake, carrying for the mill, carrying to the mill, drawing in the mill. Poor jade he jetteth still, amble he, trot he, go to a foot pace, wallop he, gallop he, rack he in trace. If his pace please not, be it soft or faster, the spurs or whip shall be his paymaster. Were not a man, trow ye, in pleasant case, with a beast in this case to change case or place. No man, except some few so unfortunate that they be out of the account a man's estate, that would agree to leave to change pains, I trow, which beast's pain being such well as all men know. Now to speak of pleasure in these twain aside, the beast to compare it is too far behind. Pleasure discussable in these thus doth befall. The beast in effect hath none, the man hath all. The reasonable man's imagination, joined with reasonable consideration, bringeth man much pleasure in considering the pleasant property of each pleasant thing. Possessed a man's behove at commanding. Beasts have things of need, but no further pleasing, since man have relief for all necessity, as well as beast and above beast. Commodity of pleasure is planted for man's recreation in the highest kinds of man's contentation, whereby pleasure and effect between these twain showeth thus: man hath all, beast have none, and more pain have beast than reasonable man. By these both exchanged for a man to beast who will, I would be loath.
You have in my mind, this right well defined, and for cause keep it well a while in your mind. Set we aside man and beast similitude, and full disposition in both see we viewed. What thing disposeth most the variety between man and beast?
Reason in man, per day.
That man who of reason is as destitute as a beast is, what difference shall we dispute?
Small in this case, excepted with this one, the sot hath a reasonable soul, beast have none.
What helpeth wit of the soul in the sot, since the body is such, it useth it not? Where impotency planteth such impediments, that use of senses are void to all intents for use of reason, so that for use of wit they are of as beasts witless, using wit no whit. In a man thus witless and the unreasonable beast, I see small difference for this life at least.
I grant me witness, and the beast does as one.
Then shall these beasts, witless man and mill horse, draw on both in one yoke, for think you the number standeth as summer doth all day in slumber? Nay, summer is a sot, fool for a king. But sots in many other men's housing bear water, bear wood, and do in drudgery, in kitchen, coal house, and in the nursery, and daily for faults which they cannot refrain, even like the mill horse, they be whipped amain. Other fools that labour not have other conceits. Upon the idle fool the flock evermore waits. They toss him, they turn him, he is jobbed and jolled with fretting and fuming, as you are foretold. Except Master Summer of sots not the best, but the mill horse may compare with him for rest. Therefore pleasure, conceiving or receiving, the witless and mill horse are both as one thing. Your last tale and this tale together conferred, by matters of both let your answer be heard, whether you would be a man reasonable or unreasonable, and except ye fable, this answer shall show plain and undoubtedly whether you would be witless or witty.
I
bell.
would say,
Sorry, Greg. So this is a thing. Jerome has taken this discussion to an entirely new level. Greg, is it different arguing with Alex than it was arguing with Eric?
yes. She seems more reasoned for some reason, if that makes sense. Or he, sorry, but you know what I mean. Some reason that makes more sense to me. But that speech was just great fun. I want to go back and do it again because it was only about the last 3 lines I got the rhythm. I got it right.
Yeah, I mean, this text would be, I think, wonderful to experiment with preparation. It's just whether the result of that experiment was anything that could be anywhere near a stage, which I guess we can talk about a little bit when we're done. But Alex, does Jerome have a new voice? What do you think?
Well, for one thing, he seems to use longer words than have been used so far. So he seems to use examples. So he sounds, to my mind, more what we would call scientific in his approach. So in that way, I think it's as you say, a different voice, a different approach, I guess, which might be why it's working differently on us as an audience, and also obviously on his interlocutor. Long words.
You're just showing off now.
No, I'm not, because I said it wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, and Eric, here's a question for you. Why do you think James leaves?
I think he's sort of threatened by sort of this intellectual who's obviously about to argue something. He thinks that he's made his point, there's no other answers. This is not an equation that can be solved by any other means. It's not like quadratic equations or anything. So he sort of goes, yeah, that's it. It's like his mic drop kind of thing, but it's not really a mic drop because he's made no real point.
Well, he won the argument. John agreed with him, right? Before Jerome enters, John agrees with James and says, you're right, Witless is better than Witty. So...
Yeah, but he doesn't really leave him much choice. He just sort of, with why or no or yes, maybe. It sort of doesn't really let the other guys speak.
It's really nice that we get that kind of... To sum up, we argued on this, and we concluded that it was, that I was right. We argued on this other thing, and we concluded that it was you. And then on the third point, it was mine again. And so, as a result, it was really nice to have that, I think, as a kind of score, almost like a score counting thing, because it does mean that it makes sense why John, at least James, I think one of them would think that the argument is over.
Yeah. What I got from, James has won the argument partly by just talking John into submission, but also he's sort of won the argument, but also won the rap battle. And Jerome's text strikes me as a little bit different from James's in that Jerome, the thoughts are a bit longer in form. There are fewer fireworks verbally. It's less rapid fire. It's a little bit more thought out, a little bit more like a sermon. And we've yet again got quite an insidious bit of ableism with Jerome talking about, well, of course, the witless is the same as a beast. So earlier, James talked about the witless having salvation on their side. They, they're innocent as children, and so they can't sin, and so they're automatically going to heaven. And Jerome says, okay, they're innocent, but rather than comparing them to children, he's comparing them to beasts, to a mill horse. Now, I happen to like horses a lot, but I still think that's kind of, by our standards today, that's extremely ableist.
Yeah, he definitely says, what's the point of having wit of the soul as a sot if you don't have reason, that where there are such other impediments that use of the senses is void for use of reason. So what's the point of having how could you possibly exist without however we define in this context wit? It's interesting because his argument is persuasive in a logical sense, in a rhetorical sense, rhetorical logic, as well as being wrong in ways that we'd consider morally now. Also, John really takes that in a rhythmic and linguistic way. He goes into lots of monosyllables and lots of very fast-paced, very wonderfully delivered, Greg, text. Having lost the previous argument, he's making a really good. He's having a really good stab at this one.
Yeah. Oh wait, Eric. Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that it's interesting how basically it reminded me a lot of like the whole Socratic dialogues thing, and it's like, oh, so you're more intelligent than a table, and it's like, but that's not what we were talking about. But hey, I will prove it to you that this is like true. So, are you more intelligent than a flea? Yes. Do you believe yourself to be intelligent? And then like sort of I feel like it's that sort of line of questioning kind of thing, but without the questioning part because they're just talking.
Yeah. I think you're right that Jerome Jerome enters a conversation where we've concluded it's better to be witless than witty, and been like, oh, so you'd rather be a horse than a person. And
wow.
You can lead a horse to philosophy, but you can't make him write your essay for you.
But narratively, structurally, it's really cool though, because you've had if you break this into a 3-act sequence, then you've had the debate going one way, the debate going the other way. It concludes, and then suddenly we have 12 angry men happening. Right, where everyone is in agreement except for one person who turns up and starts trying to change everybody else's point of view, which is really cool. And also, just going back to Liza, what you were saying about summer being mentioned a lot, there's a very interesting perspective shift on what summer has to go through, and how that's maybe not great.
Yeah. And one other thing that Jerome does that I really like is draw the distinction. We've been talking about witty and witless, but Jerome is the first to mention the word wise, which is kind of the next step up from being witty. And here at the end of the speech we've just had, he's starting to talk about reason and being reasonable. If we can read on now, Alexandra, if we can have just the last bit of your last speech from your last tale and this tale together conferred, if you have the place.
I somehow don't have the place.
Wait, listen, mill horse are both this one thing that bit.
At 8 lines, or so up from the end of the speech.
Yes, my apologies. Your last tale and this tale together conferred, by matter of both, let your answer be heard, whether you would be a man reasonable or unreasonable, and except ye fable, this answer shall show plain and undoubtedly whether you would be witless or witty.
In good faith, I take this conclusion so full that I may give over, and even so I will for this life.
Well, then, for the life to come. Few words where reason is may knit up the sum concerning pleasure after this life present, by which he and you dissolved argument. Both parts by both parties were so ended that your part full faintly ye defended. Though the more merit of our redemption stands in Christ's passion, yet in execution thereof shall we stand by God's justice, except, having time and wit, his commandments be kept. And who in which doth most diligently plant imps of good works given by God chiefly, most highly of God shall he have reward.
How prove ye that?
By Scripture, have in regard, Christ in the Gospel of John doth this declare, in the house of my Father, saith Christ, there are divers and many mansions, that is to say, as the exposition of St. Austin doth weigh, there are in heaven divers degrees of glory, to be received of men accordingly. Each man as he useth God's gifts of grace, so shall he have in heaven his degree or place. But mark this chief ground, the sum of Scripture saith, we must walk with these gifts in the path of faith, in which walk who worketh most in God's commandment, he shall have most. And St. Paul showeth like intent, as one star differeth from another in shining, so the resurrection of the dead, which like thing appeareth in other places of Scripture.
I grant, and what then?
That what cometh straight in you. Since he that useth God's gifts best shall have best, and he next who does next, and so for the rest, and that the witty do daily work or may, and the witless not worketh by no way, so that his reward may compare in degree. If witty have this advantage, thinketh me, the wise wittiest place wish I discernfully, rather than place of witless.
So do I, if wish would win it, but where the sot is sure, the witty standeth in hazardous adventure, to lose all, and so in fine fair and well, instead of way to heaven, to take the way to hell. In words commands do in faith walketh not, by God's justice he hath damnation in lot. And what other folks feel I cannot tell, but such frail fools feel I in myself to dwell, and by them to lose heaven I am so adread, that the soft surety of least joy there would God I had. An old proverb maketh with this which I take good, better one bird in hand than 10 in the wood.
What if one of the 10 birds in the wood, each one, were as good as that one in your hand alone, and that you might catch them all 10 if you would? Would you not leave one bird for the 10 now told?
Yes.
Would you not, having help, take reasonable pain for the increase of 10 birds for one in gain?
Yes.
Then in God's name fear not, let flee this one. Ye shall, I trust, catch these 10 birds, every one. Your fleshly frail falls are such that ye dread, as much as hope in having heavenly need, by which dread surely of joys there the most small wish ye rather than bid venture to have joys all. And the sooner by this you choose, this I deem. The least joy there is more than man can esteem. But now to remove this block, your great dread, we have a lever that removeth dread with speed. God suffereth, but not willeth he, any man to sin. Nor God willeth no sinner's death, but he be in such endless malice that his final estate in lack of penitence make himself reprobate. In time of this life, at each penitent call, our merciful Maker remitteth sins all from the perpetual pain infernal, whatever they be, from least to most carnal. by which goodness of God we are set in hope's chair, not to breed presumption, but to banish despair. The grace of God always to grace allureth man, and when man will call for grace, of grace assureth man to assist man God's commandments to fulfill at all times, if man cast out ill-willing will. Now, since the Christian that worketh most in faith shall have most in reward, as the scripture says, and that God's grace by grace called for will assist, man's will to work well, always when man list. And as instant of due ordered penitence, man hath God's mercy of all former offence, which showeth for mercy, man is not more greedy to ask than God to grant mercy is ready. This seen, what show ye to maintain the fear which ye do towards desperation were in a while here?
What shall I? The show of that fear is extinct even by this pretty tale, thus pithily linked, since God to the most faithful worker giveth most. To make man work, much God hasteth as imposed, and when man hath not wrought at contrition, God granteth man of damnation remission, making men sure of fruit of Christ's passion, except man's wilful will mar all good fashion. But this I dread God, as standeth with love and hope, but no desperate dread doth my but no desperate dread doth my heart now grope.
10 birds in one wood, or one in hand alone, which choose you now?
I will not change 10 for 1, since the bird will help me to take them all as short on mine use as the one bird could fall.
Well, for conclusion, since you soundly see that witty have pleasure here in more degree than witless, and also witty wise see in heaven by scripture in higher joys be, than though witless. You seeing this clearly, whether would ye now be witless or witty?
Witty! And the more witty am I for yow, of which heartily I thank you, and now where my mate, my lord, said that is gone, better be sot Soma than sage Solomon. In forsaking what I would now rather be, sage Solomon than sot Soma, I assure ye.
As ye show wit in change of former mind, being now from witless to witty inclined, so aptly your wit in what wit shall devise, as in good use of wit by grace ye may rise, to be both witty and wittily wise, in governance of God's gifts, in such size as wisdom always guideth, whereby this shall fall. God's gifts to God's glory both ye may use and shall. These words of counsel in which I now waded, to him whom I told them I only assign. I am by all circumstance full persuaded. This sort being sorted in sort thus fine, need none exhortation, or at least not mine. This sort have not only by nature his wit, but also by grace like wisdom joined to it.
These 3 staves next following, in the king's absence, are void. That is, if the king is not in the theatre, don't say this part. But we will say it, since it's right here.
And as in them thereby God's gifts shine most may, so stands their affairs whereby they so shine shall. If the gloss of God's shine not bright each way, in them who having a realm in governal, set forth their governance to God's glory all, charitably aiding subjects in each kind, the shining of God's gifts, where shall we then find? And of this high sort, the high head most excellent is our most loved and dread supreme sovereign, the shining of whose most excellent talent employed to God's glory above all the train. Thus wit wanteth her recital to retain, and that all his faithful feel the fruit of his fame. Of course I pray pardon in passing the same, praying that prince whom our prince his great grace gave, to grant him long length of increase and estate, at full fine whereof his most high gifts to have, by his most faithful use, reward in such rate as is promised in scripture, alleged late. The joys not all only inestimable, the joys not all only inestimable, but more the degree of joys incomparable. Continuance whereof, with fruitful increase, I heartily wish for increase of reward, as Scripture alleged late doth witness, the witty wise worker to be preferred above the idle sot, and yet to regard each man himself, so to apply in this, as ye may all obtain the high degree of bliss.
Yay! And so ends the play, in rather as abruptly as it began. But thank God Jerome arrived to sort us all out. We were in danger of becoming permanently witless there.
Yes, and this thing of the scripture alleged late, which is to say the scripture that I just mentioned. It's kind of going right. Use God as the argument, because that will win. That won last time as well. That also won when James used it. Also, if the king's around, throw some praise at him, and also some indication that maybe he should gather his wits too.
Eric, what of the night, my brother?
I was just going to say that it's like you get the impression that John would be persuaded by anyone. Even like if the play kept going and there was someone else come to convince him of something else, he'd be totally agreeing with that. Like, so yeah, totally, I'm totally on board with this. Whereas like James and Jerome have very clear opinions of what they sort of want to say.
I wonder, so does that put John in the role of a student?
Perhaps.
I don't know. Greg, do you have a sense of who John is and what kind of costume he might wear?
I think student sounds like actually a very good idea.
Student with
I almost feel like John is the everyman stuck in the middle. I know this is in a very simpleton terms. This does remind me a little bit of gentleness and nobility, in that sense of that I look up to him but look down to him a little bit. It was interesting that you were saying about the whoever it was as the peasant, as the farmer, because actually it reminded me a little bit of the ploughman, but actually names have escaped me tonight. Jerome coming in does feel a little bit like that sort of interruption last week, with the sort of, hey, come on guys, we're going to bring reality in now. Going back to, I'm assuming this was Rob, bless him, putting a note in. I like the idea of Jerome having been there throughout.
Beatboxing.
Yeah, silently there, or not so silently there. I found it really interesting that actually once dear old Eric challenged me to a duel of beatboxing. It actually helped. Somehow I found the rhythm again. Trying to rap it actually made it a lot easier, and I actually understood it better for some reason, because once I got over the really odd rhythms.
I think that is a good exercise, and if I were handed this to rehearse, I would probably make my actors, I would probably say, stop acting and just speak the rhyme. That maybe this one makes more sense the faster you do it, as long as you've done your homework in advance and know what it means. Which it would be nice to have a second look at it, having done that.
Yeah, which is how a rap battle works, right? It's partly it's what is being said, but partly it is the way it's being said, and the as in the poetry of it, and the rhythm and the playing with style. And I feel as though, as you say, Greg, once we started looking at it like a rap battle, you actually have a much definitely we can hear a much different a much clearer difference between the voices of the characters in I think in both what they say and how they say it. So like John seems to use the shortest the greatest number of short words, which allows for a very sparkly, very kind of speedy delivery, very snappy, as you said, Liza. You had a much better word for that. Whereas James seems to formulate it as scholarly arguments on point one, and then there's the second point, and then going back to your first point, you know, whereas. Yeah, whereas Jerome sort of comes in to introduce a new rhythm or a new style of referring of addressing the points. And also it's interesting that the very first line, going back to it, John's very first line addresses James as merciful Lord, or potentially invokes the heaven. You can play it either way. And then says, essentially, I'd be surprised if you could prove this. A marvelous matter if reason with this conclusion accord. So it's like challenge to a rap battle, right?
Bring it.
You know, bring it.
Yeah, and you know, when freestyling, which is not a thing I could ever win any kind of battle at, but when freestyling, your thoughts shape the rhymes, but the rhymes also shape your thoughts, which is an interesting thing to contemplate. Eric, I think your character, James, had the most pyrotechnic verse of anyone. So like kudos for getting through that, because I think your verse must have been the most challenging, the most internal rhymes and alliteration and sort of look how clever I am sort of writing.
Yeah, it was kind of like, oh yes, the witless of the witty are the witless and the witty are completely witless, and it's like, what on earth am I talking about? It's like this what, and then it rhymes in the next line as well. So it's like all the consonants, like the cadavers of the knowledge of I don't know, whatever compulsion, so on and so forth, and it's like okay, I'll go with that. But also because what threw me off was I kind of got what the line was going to say, but then obviously because the words are reversed, it's like, you know, like doth comes after the verb instead of like hast thou done this, or you know, like questions basically. And yeah, that threw me off a bit. But it's like once you get the point of that they're trying to say, it's like, yeah, just blast through it. Yeah, it's wordy.
Yeah, and those beautiful alliterations and kind of sentence constructions are, you know, they do happen. Like some alliteration happens with all three. Some snappy kind of quick short words happens with all three. But it feels as though, you know, they are more. They seem to be the preferred tool of one or another of the three. What I find Jerome seems to do more than the other two is break his sentences across. It is not end stop, basically, which is quite mind screwy.
Yes, I do kind of love the joy that Heywood takes in writing these rhymes in sort of just this lava flow of verse. I'm not even sure what kind of substances were available to him to write this. This can't have been. Was this before caffeinated drinks were available in England? Did he not even have any caffeine, the poor man?
He might have had.
That's all right. He might have had ergot.
Well, some ergot of rye probably, ergot sandwich, very delicious, makes you see all kinds of fun things.
Definitely puts your mind on a different plane. Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
No, I was just going to say all those S sounds, like sleep, the salt sleeps to seek, and like in a sudden losing that gift again might not be the witty repressed with pain. It's like, why would you do that to a person? How much do you hate them? Like, it's like that thing from, I think it's like the Magic Flute or something, where there's this like lovely aria, the Queen of the Night or whatever. There's this aria, and it's got like these incredibly high notes. And if you read the history of the song, it's about how Mozart hated his sister-in-law so much that he wanted her to lose her voice or something.
Yeah. Mozart was a bit of a bastard to his singers, for sure, or to his sopranos, anyway. And yeah, can you imagine being an actor or a performer and just being handed this chunk of paper by Heywood and going, John, you want me to say what? So I'm guessing Heywood had to buy the drinks after the show. And yet, incredibly enough, this play is thought to have been rewritten in the 1540s. That's where, or slightly rewritten, that's where those last few verses, potentially to the king, are thought to have been added at that time. Again, we don't know. But there's various manuscripts of this, and this is what people think. And, good Lord, what did I... frog in my throat, and I don't think it's Kermit. That so incredibly, somewhat, this might have been staged twice. I mean, it might have been revived. I mean,
I was going to ask about how popular do we know this to have been? So when you say staged twice, that's not actually literally two performances. That's a string of performances twice.
Well, we don't know. I mean, in general, this doesn't read like something written for a playhouse. Usually if something is written for a playhouse, it gets done several times, or as long as people will pay to see it, it keeps being done, and this can go on for years. But if something is written for a specific occasion, or for a family to perform in their stately home, or for a school, sometimes those things are just performed for that occasion, and then they try and sell a few print copies to whoever else might want to do them. Heywood had a long enough and successful enough career that maybe someone just said, "Oh, John, do you have anything to do with this next banquet?" And he was like, "Yes." And the actors were like, "No." So, and it's interesting that in the copy that we have, I'm not sure which particular copy the stage direction is from, but saying, these three at the end of this play, about the bit at the end, these three staves next following in the king's absence are void. So did he write it knowing the king was going to be there for at least one performance? Did he write it not knowing whether the king would be there or not, and just saying, "Look, just memorize this bit, say it if he's there"? Who knows? I don't have answers.
Well, that's something. It would seem to be indicative of there being either going well in case and in case not, or for those performances where the king is around, implying that there have been multiples of performances without the king and with the king, and that it's terribly, terribly popular. This is why I'm asking, because it feels like obviously a great deal of effort for just the one performance, but also because of actually, again, leaning into the rap aspect of it. It's not as though we discovered this in the 90s. 1590s, I mean. It's that I'm sure that they could have found it interesting and engaging at the time. So there might have been, very good reason to put this on, both because, it references people we know, it talks about summer and he's right there, but also because of the style. And potentially the argument and its educational value, save your soul.
Eric,
Yes. No, I was going to say that bit we were talking about earlier with the physical business. I was thinking of that as sort of like, there's a very specific cartoon that I have in mind. It's Daffy Duck and like Bugs Bunny about to like box and stuff, and Porky is between them going, yeah, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And, obviously Daffy goes, oh, so I can't do this, or I can't do this, and I can't do this. And it's like, sort of obviously doing all those things. And, I kind of imagine it like that, doing that, but with this text.
There is sort of a Looney Tunes characters feel to this, isn't there? It reminds me a bit of Duck Amuck, where the background keeps changing, and you keep trying to do one thing, and then the background changes to a ski slope, and then it changes to a pot of lava, and then it changes to a dance floor, and that might be a fun production idea.
Yeah, because it's definitely not set anywhere clearly. It hasn't got, it doesn't care about who these people are, what they do for a living, where they are right now. None of that is specified.
In the notes Rob sent me, he said he wanted to set it in a pub. And just have Jerome stand up from one of the tables in the middle of the audience.
Yes. Yeah, no, it definitely feels like the kind of, on a much heightened level, the kind of argument that people would have over one too many pints, and the kind of arguments that they would make as well, where you sort of go, but wait a sec, oh, sorry, we've moved on. But I didn't think that made any, but we're talking about something else now. Yeah, and also these ways in which they discuss things very deeply and far and philosophically, but not without resorting to philosophical discourse. So they don't go, well, I think you will find that in Aristotle, it's like this and like that. They're not, it doesn't feel like a university debate.
No, it's true. There's no Latin, which is weird for an argument play like this. We had plenty of Latin in Gentleness and Nobility.
Yeah, whereas these guys are, just John and James down the pub having a chat.
Yeah. So I think it's about time to go to final thoughts. If you have anything more in your brain that you can possibly bring to this screen and this discussion, and the fickle finger of fate goes to Eric first.
I don't know, what can I add? I like that it's one of those things where, like, the faster you say it, the more fun it is, although you have no idea what you're saying. Even like with a cold read, it's like, I don't know what it means, but it's funny. Just because it's people arguing, basically. I think I would like to see this as like sort of Eminem versus like someone else. I don't know, like maybe Kanye West or something, and then someone else comes in like Dr. Dre. I don't know, it works in my head. It's fine. Just because like that they would have the appropriate like level of energy to keep it going as well. Yeah.
And yeah, I would love to see that. Yeah. And my field of rap references, especially nowadays, are kind of narrow. But there was a reference to Lin-Manuel Miranda in chat, and I think some of the rhymes he uses are not a million miles from this stuff, that he and Heywood might nod recognition at each other across the centuries. Greg, what are your final thoughts?
It needs a second look, because I need to go back and I must admit that was read as I always do, blind, and that is one of the few texts I really wish I'd gone and read first. I might have understood it. No, brilliant, love it. Really interested to see how it works more closely.
Yeah. It does feel like it was written to be spoken. And Alex, final thought?
Yes, I agree with Greg. I really, really want to. Can we do that again? Except better.
And faster.
Well, no, I mean better in the sense of with preparation. I think that obviously this text definitely requires that a lot more than some of the text we get away with without preparing for. But also, I think there's something really interesting in how this feels. It feels really good to be reading it, and I think when you've got and that's what, on a cold read. So when you've got the time to prepare and to work out what your arguments actually are and how you make them, and you're able to set those to, the music of the verse, not in a literal musical sense necessarily, but, even if it's just as an argument, there will be things that normally as an actor you do where you change the pitch or the rhythm or the way in which you speak in a whole variety of ways. And I think this play suits itself to very careful setting of that, just as one would do, with music. And that would be the thing that makes the arguments palatable and followable to an audience. And so it becomes a lot more interesting, not just because it's a great virtuosic feat of speaking alliteration fast, but because they are saying things that I understand and agree or disagree with, but they're speaking at the speed of my brain, which, we usually don't get to see, we usually don't get to watch. So yeah, I think it would be really fascinating in that way, in that sense.
Yeah, much to my surprise, I find myself agreeing with everyone that says this could use a second look. And if we could get David Diggs to speak it, so much the better. I would, yeah. So Rob, if you see this, that's what that's what the public demand, and by the public I mean 4 people, but that's our thoughts, and
Comments
it just
below anybody who's watching and agrees.
Yeah. I don't know whether to invite comment is a good or a bad thing, but it's YouTube, so we're going to get it anyway. It just remains for me to thank our 3 excellent readers, Alex, Greg, and Eric, and to remind people that if you do want to listen to a prepared version of this play, there is a full audio adaptation at the Beyond Shakespeare podcast. If you have a dig through the archives with a sort of trowel or something, you will find it. Yes, thank you for watching this Beyond Shakespeare experience. Come back for more Beyond Shakespeare experiences. We promise they're not all like this. Thank you very much, and goodbye.